and was only suitable for people aged 18 or over, will almost certainly have an adult theme, and might well contain sex or violence, which are quite graphic. It may also contain explicit language, including sexual swear words. Thanks for listening.
But here's what his revelation comes to him. He's kind of got all this stuff, like touching, wiping, lowering of the animals.
Not wiping, whipping.
Yeah. Also not touching.
I am dyslexic. I hope I'm not having like a stroke.
Do it live! Fuck it! Do it live!
And an atheist almost always becomes supporters of eugenics and abortion.
A swine is hungry for nuts.
Jesus hates him too.
Satan is real.
Being a Satanist is an open declaration of revolt against counterproductive received wisdom and mindless rogue tradition.
Decapitate her head off.
We're done. You're done.
Obama!
Welcome to the Godless Rebelution. Today is Wednesday, March 29th, and this is episode 150.
We made it.
150. And I'm Dan.
I'm Ryan.
Matt's not here because traffic.
He was a wimp.
Apparently the traffic really sucks around the Orem area today. He said, so for the past couple of weeks, he's had trouble because there's been accidents on the way to the house, and it's taken him a long time to get here. And I got a text message from him today saying, I can't even get on the freeway now. Fuck it, I'm not going to sit in traffic for 2 hours. So, but he was bummed out because he was looking forward to this and meeting Jason and all that. But we are joined in studio by the awesome Jason Sock.
That's about right. Awesome.
Oh, we got Jason Stock in studio with us. He is the brewmaster at Squatters downtown Salt Lake City. An old friend of mine from the days of yore working at AT&T Universal Card.
And someone you've mentioned a few times
in the 90s.
Podcast.
Yes. Jason is the man. Say hi, Jason.
Hi, Jason.
Jason is the guy who first turned me on to any bit of atheism, anything. I've mentioned before that the first atheist book atheist-related book that I read was Sagan's Demon-Haunted World. Science is a Candle in the Dark. And that was at the recommendation of this fine bearded gent sitting across the table from me. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jason. You are a foreman.
Yes, foreman, born and raised LDS, pretty much raised here in Utah, Salt Lake City. Went on a mission to Indiana, of all places. Every time somebody asked where I went on my mission and said Indiana, India? No, Indiana. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how far you want me to get ahead of myself, but yeah.
All the things. Start early. So attending church as a faithful Mormon. How many brothers and sisters have you got?
I've got 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
You'll notice I didn't say, do you have any other siblings? Because you're LDS and I know you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the oldest, but I've got 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And, we were all raised LDS. I wouldn't say, hyper conservative or anything, but my parents seemed to take it pretty seriously. And, in hindsight, I found out my dad was just going through the motions, but he didn't come out until after I came out. So I was kind of the catalyst for my entire family.
Nice. You're just making atheists wherever you go.
Yeah, kind of. I don't know that they'd all claim atheism quite, but they're not Mormon for sure. So, yeah. I think a lot of people get uncomfortable with that, with the term still.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I did for a while, and actually you already mentioned it, but Carl Sagan's book is what, that was really when I realized what I was. I went through that typical, from Mormon to non-denominational Christian to, okay, now the Bible doesn't make any sense now that I've studied that. Well, I had studied that pretty thoroughly, but I thought there's got to be something to this, and left that behind. Then I thought, well, I'm just a spiritual person,
maybe a deist kind of thing.
Yeah, probably deist, and then agnostic was more comfortable for a while, and then actually it was George H. Smith's book, the Atheism: The Case Against God. I guess was the one that when I read that, I realized no, you're an atheist. You know, you can quit being a wuss about it.
Stop being namby-pamby about it.
Yeah, step up and be an atheist. You know, that is what you are.
George Ace, I haven't read that one.
Oh, really?
Is it good?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's dry, philosophical crap, but that's what I like. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Highly recommend. I lent that copy out so many times I don't have it anymore, or I'd offer it to you. So, but yeah, I think Sagan, what I liked about him, he was so gentle with you. You know, he could bring you over without like slamming your head against the wall. Where George Smith, not so much. He's pretty to the point, and makes a really good case, I think, for atheism. But now I've lost my train of thought. Where was I going? Sorry.
Oh, we were just talking about early days and growing up LDS and brothers and sisters and
So. Yeah, raised pretty typical Mormon family out in West Jordan, Utah. You know, we every so often kept the Sabbath holy when my parents felt like it. And but
so you guys didn't attend church regularly then?
We attended church, but when I say kept the Sabbath holy, we were one of the few families in the neighborhood that couldn't go out to play on Sunday. You had to sit inside and watch all of your friends outside because we were keeping the Sabbath holy.
Right.
So we were that religious, but not. I never considered us like too crazy.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
Crazy people never think they're crazy, though, right?
No, that's true. Are you crazy?
It's the sane people who question if they're sane or not, I guess.
Yeah. Ended up, I actually, in high school, had a teacher. I wish I had a better memory now, but he, you know, it's probably just a world history class or something. I remember going over world religions like the Greeks and everything else, and then probably being a sophomore, junior in high school, putting that together finally and saying like, well, how is that any different than what we're doing today? You know, their God seems silly to us.
Yeah, like, did they actually believe this stuff?
Yeah, and then stepping back and being like, wait a minute, this whole Jesus story and Muhammad or whatever other current religion is equally the same. And I stayed after to talk to my teacher in high school, and he had the guts to kind of tell me like, look, I can't really talk to you about this, but you're on the right track, you know? And he gave me that confidence, and I would have considered myself an atheist as a junior in high school. And then I met my now ex-wife, and she, shall we say, converted me to Mormonism. But
she redirected you onto the right path?
Right. And to be fair, I mean, it was sincere at the time. It wasn't all about just having a girlfriend or whatever. When I converted, you know, back to Mormonism, I'd been pretty rebellious. I'd dabbled with drinking and smoking cigarettes and things, and so everybody in the ward, in the neighborhood, you know, didn't like me. All the adults.
He's rebel.
The rebel, the bad seed. Yeah. And then when she, you know, convinced me that we should be together, but she wanted to marry somebody who was, you know, worthy to go to the temple and all that.
I can't get into the celestial kingdom unless you call me there. Come on.
Exactly. So I fell for that, to be honest. But what made it sincere was when I did that, you know, in hindsight, I can see it. All of the people in the neighborhood, suddenly I was the golden child. The adults loved me. I got a lot more privileges. My parents let me borrow the car without question, gave me gas money, and I mistook all of these good feelings as the Spirit. And I like to think of myself as a pretty, what's the right word here?
Sane?
Well, yeah, not at the time. There's a different, when I actually believe in something, I'll really follow through with it.
Yeah.
So once
dedicated.
I decided like this is, thank you. Once I decided, oh yeah, the church is true. I've got these feelings and it's feeling good, and you know, I've got to do what they ask now. And so I decided, well, I was a 17, 18-year-old kid, and I decided the thing you do is you go on a mission. And
yep.
Before I knew it, I had a patriarchal blessing, which, to be fair to them, that was, I would call a spiritual experience. In hindsight, I see how it happens, but at 18, it blew my socks off. You know, it's just like, wow, someone just laid out my whole life for me, and it sounds pretty good if I just stay worthy. I've got a good life ahead of me, and next thing I knew, I was sitting in Provo at the MTC with everything I owned in a suitcase, and honestly kind of going, well, fuck, what did I do? You know? Then I thought, well, you know, there was a big stigma. I don't know how common this is in my neighborhood. Once you committed and went, you did not come home early. I mean, that was...
Oh, yeah. If you come home early from your mission, that's a
huge taboo.
Yeah.
So.
You might as well just tattoo a scarlet A on your forehead.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, I realized, well, you're in it now, so let's do it and make the best of it. And went on the mission, I'd call myself a pretty hyper-committed missionary. You hear guys joke about, going out there and screwing around and doing whatever, and I took it very seriously. And in hindsight, again, I'm using that word a lot, sorry. But I'm glad that I did, because it taught me to take the religion seriously, and I really studied it. And my mission is what got me out of the church, for sure, eventually.
Well, I want to back up for just a second. So you mentioned that once you reconverted and started going back to church, that, everybody started looking at you differently, right? Your parents would give you the keys to the car, give you gas money, and you viewed that all as, part of the spirit and everything. And I guess I'd never really thought about it that way, that, if people view you as a good church-going person, then the rewards kind of come along with that, right? And so it would be easy to view that as, oh, well, this is the Spirit talking to me and telling me that the church is true, because now my life is so much easier. I'm getting all these extra blessings. People are treating me with more respect. My life is easier.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see that. That's something that had never really occurred to me before.
Sure. Yeah. At the time, it didn't me either. I just thought, wow, things are falling into place for a change. And my parents aren't always mad at me, and the neighbors will wave when I walk down the street, And then, boy, tell them you're going on a mission, and that goes up exponentially, and it was kind of a good gravy train there for a while. And then, just ended up on the mission. And the real catalyst for me, it was maybe halfway through my mission. We taught a gentleman who happened to be black the discussions, and to be frank, the issue with the blacks in the priesthood had never occurred to me as an issue.
So when you say the discussions, what do you mean?
Well, Mormon missionaries have, as I recall, it was the 9 discussions that are kind of rote, memorized, short little lessons that are designed to teach somebody the basics of the church.
The sales pitch.
Yeah. Exactly. And those discussions leave out a lot of, obviously, leave out a lot of juicy details like, polygamy, the banning of the blacks in the priesthood. Quite a few things are left out of these discussions. They're just all about eternal life with your family and won't it feel good, and
it's the milk before the meat, right?
Exactly.
It's all of the great things about the church, and none of the things that would possibly turn any potential convert away, because you're trying to convert them, right? So you're only telling them the good and fluffy stuff.
I'll give them that. They bring up tithing fairly quickly.
Oh yeah.
Which you think would kind of be like, okay, never mind.
You want how much of my paycheck?
10%.
10%. Of my what? Of my gross? But taught his name was John. I'm struggling to remember his last name, but we taught him most of the discussions, and one day we showed up to teach another discussion, and he seemed kind of out of character, nervous, had kind of a nervous laughter, and just
a little agitated.
Agitated for sure. He I should also mention, was married to a member of the church, and she happened to be a white woman, but anyway, we sat down to teach him, and he just kept kind of being agitated, and what's wrong, John? You guys wouldn't believe it. Just it's too crazy. I can't even tell you. And we're like, try us. We hear a lot of stuff. We're missionaries. No, it's just my mom just told me.
We're worldly 19-year-olds. You can tell us anything. We've seen it all.
Exactly. We kind of got it out of him that his mom had told him. Well, I should back up. He says, well, my mom told me something about your church, but it's just too crazy. I know you guys, you're too nice. I know it's not true. Well, test us. What did she tell you? We'll be honest with you no matter what. And he says, well, she said that your church didn't allow black men to hold the priesthood until 1978. And then the room fell silent, and I think he was waiting for us to be like, well, that's not true.
That's crazy talk. Who would tell you that? Yeah.
2 white kids from Utah sitting here going like, well, fuck, that's actually true. And he got up, he burst into tears. He left his own home,
Wow.
I think understandably very upset. He was very, very interested in joining the church. I think primarily to keep his wife happy, but I think he was taking it seriously, and we were left sitting there with his now crying wife and him gone, sitting in his home. And I just remember the bike ride home with my companion saying, God, if I was John, I would have a problem with this. And as naive as it sounds, I know it's hard to understand, but growing up in West Jordan, Utah, our graduating class of my high school was like 2,000 people, and I think we had 2 black kids in the entire school, and they were both adopted into a Mormon family. So I just really didn't have a lot of experience in that regard, and it didn't affect me, so I didn't think about it the way I should have. And I guess that was the catalyst that changed the way I thought about kind of everything in my life, but religion in particular. It taught me about my privilege, for sure, to realize I'm a white male. I'm kind of, forgive me, listeners, but the top of the heap socially.
Yeah.
I don't want to be. I happen to be there, and I have to remember that. And then that quickly started to unravel the whole church, frankly, because then I started looking at everything from that perspective. What if I wasn't white male? Where would I be in this church? And so then polygamy really stuck in my craw when I started reading about reading the Doctrine and Covenants, frankly, about what Joseph Smith did to basically blackmail Emma into accepting polygamy. And I had to realize, like, wait, if I was a woman, I wouldn't have anything to do with this.
But the angel has a flaming sword on it. Come on.
Right. And so, those things happened. But the church does such a fine job of grooming you to question yourself rather than questioning the church.
Yeah.
Doubt your doubts before you doubt your church or your faith. Yeah.
And so I, honorably finished my mission with my doubts, but I talked to leaders in the church and was always told, you need to fast and pray about that more. And
did that work while you were on your mission, or was it still the doubts still lingering the whole time?
The doubts lingered, but they did a great job psychologically on me, where my assumption was I wasn't praying enough.
There's something wrong with you, not with the church.
I wasn't studying enough. Yeah. And I mean, I read the Book of Mormon cover to cover at least 12 times. I've read the Bible cover to cover, New Testament 9 times, and I think the Old Testament 4 times. So wow. I've read the books, and I was lucky enough to live with a member family that had a really extensive library of LDS books, like volumes of the history of the church, and really delved into that, trying to find the official answers to my questions. And as happens to a lot of people, the more I dug into it and more I studied, the more questions came up. But at the same time, they really had me over a barrel thinking I was the problem. Yeah. Because the church is obviously true, so you've just got to figure that out and get in line.
They are really good at that, about making people think that there's something wrong with them versus something being wrong with the church. Right? Yeah. But because the church is perfect. It's God's restored church here on earth. Yeah. Surely there's nothing wrong with it. If you find a problem, it's with you. You just don't understand it clearly enough. You haven't prayed hard enough. You're not faithful enough.
Right. You look too long at the Victoria's Secret catalog. How could the Spirit be with you at this point?
You've been around somebody who has exposed their bare shoulders, maybe.
I mean, this is an embarrassing but true account for my mission. This is how psychologically how good they have you. I'm a 20-year-old kid that didn't masturbate for at least a year, believe it or not.
Wow.
Guys, I know, right? Huh? Pat on the back here. And one day was
your little factory still just churning stuff out though?
Yeah, it certainly does. But yeah, I think you do hit a point though, where you're just kind of, you give up on it, maybe. I don't know. But we'd come home from a day of proselyting, and we had an open mail area at our apartment where they left everyone's magazines and things at the bottom. And somebody there had a Playboy that had come out of the black wrapper. And was open. Yeah. I caught a glimpse of a boobie, and we got the factory up and running that night. And then looking back on this, and this is horribly embarrassing, but it's true. I went to confess this to another adult man and sat tearfully across the table, crying about how I had masturbated one time in a year, and felt the need to go confess that to another adult human being as a 20-year-old man. And didn't occur to me at the time how weird that was. It just seemed like what I needed to do to get pure enough to go and have the Spirit to be able to find people and teach people the gospel. So
Hell, in basic training, we announced it. Or even on deployments, it's like, I'm going to jerk off. Don't come in the tent.
No, the mission's like the opposite of that. I think a lot of guys are doing it and not talking about it. I was sincere enough that I genuinely felt guilty about it, and in hindsight, yeah, I look back on that period of my life. I should have brought a journal with me. It would be fun for us to read some excerpts because it's like an entirely different person.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with what the Lord thinks of what I'm doing and what happened that day and, twisting every small little thing that happened through my day into the providence of the Lord guiding us to this and that. And, yeah, anyway, sorry, I keep really losing my train of thought. These are old memories now.
No, this is awesome. This is what we do, man. We just kind of ramble and chit-chat, and you're good. I finished my mission. I'd say I still definitely believed in the church, but had these really nagging questions. Had talked to my mission president repeatedly, tried to talk to other companions, but they didn't really appreciate like most religious people, they don't appreciate being introduced to those questions. They don't like the cognitive dissonance that comes with you bringing up questions that they've never really thought about, and then they've got to start thinking about it themselves, and so they just try to push it all away.
And I read the God Makers, and while on my mission, which was a big no-no, I admit that. We were not supposed to read any what they call anti-Mormon literature. And I will say this, fuck the evangelical Christians for that shit, because it makes it so easy for a Mormon to read it. And there are truths in that book, but there's also enough horseshit and lies for you to write them off completely and be like, well, the church is true. And I can't remember the author's name of that book, but it's just so full of Christian horseshit that you're easily able to say, well, they're just making up lies because they did.
Yeah.
I'd been through the temple. I knew they were lying about what happened in the temple and things like that. Anyway, so I was able to discount that and just kept thinking.
And it's not like the LDS church is devoid of enough crazy shit that they could have been just completely honest.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And still made you have all of these questions.
Right. Exactly. So, called my dad that night, though. I remember that, and just, being distraught, like, the church might not be true. And he's like, well, walked me through a few things and finished my mission, got home. Unfortunately, made some gigantic decisions. And the next, my ex-wife had waited for me. So there's that pressure.
She was waiting for her missionary to come home.
She did it. She successfully waited. And so.
Oh, that's adorable.
Well, we're divorced now. So if I can speak freely, in hindsight, I wish she had not waited, but I have two beautiful children. Let me put it that way.
Hi, this is Yvette Dontremont, aka the SciBabe, and you're listening to Godless Rebelution. You can find me at SciBabe.com, at my Twitter account at the SciBabe, and if you've hunt really hard, you can find me at Pornhub. I dare you.
My journey through Christianity was the journey of slowly dialing down the supernatural, slowly dialing down the crazy, until there was nothing left.
Rejoining the Godless Rebelution podcast now.
Yeah, I got home, felt an immense pressure to get married, but also wanted to. I felt like all the chips were falling where they should. She'd waited. I'd served an honorable mission. One day this is all going to make sense to me, and I won't have this nagging doubt that's going on in me.
So how much of that, and I know it's a base and childish caricature, I'm sure, of many returned missionaries and LDS people, that it's the drive to get married is the drive to have sex.
Yeah. Again, in hindsight, yeah. Yeah, I see that now. At the time, I think I would have sincerely said, no, that isn't what I'm in it for.
Yeah.
I can easily look back now and say, yeah, that was a big factor, because of course you're interested in that. And it's the only way you feel like you're going to be able to do it without going to hell, or ruining your whole life, or disappointing your family and everything else, and your community.
Making baby Jesus cry.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, so we were married, 6 months after I got home.
Wow.
So, I was
You
married.
waited a long time.
I know, yeah. Well, she waited 2 years. So.
Did you get married in the temple then?
Yeah. We got married in the Salt Lake Temple downtown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'd already been through the temple. That's something we should also probably touch on, how fun that is the first time you go through. I don't know if either of you.
I was never LDS.
Okay, wasn't sure on that. Sorry. Right?
Yeah. Oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
No, I left the church. Well, I would say that I was never really a big part of the church. You know, my dad at the time quit smoking just long enough to be able to baptize me. You know, like we would go to church most Sundays. I don't remember a whole lot because it was, you know, I was so young, but I remember going to church fairly regularly. I don't remember if both of my parents were there or if it was just, you know, me and my sister and my mom. But I know my dad had to quit smoking long enough to be able to baptize me. But then, you know, shortly after I was baptized, my parents split and then got divorced. So, and when they were going through a lot of their marital problems, the bishop lived right next door to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom, you know, telling me about it later, said that when they were having all of these marital problems and my dad was, you know, really emotionally and verbally abusive and physically abusive to me and my sister, and like would destroy shit around the house when they got in arguments and everything, you know, typical white LDS man whose authority is being questioned. And so he did end up smashing shit around the house. That my mom went and talked to the bishop about it, and the bishop told her that she just needed to be more submissive and do whatever my father said, because it was Satan trying to split our family apart.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and that's part of what the temple teaches women. I mean, not quite in those words, but I mean, essentially that's one of the
more
vows.
Subtle.
Slightly more subtle, not even terribly more subtle, but yeah, basically the woman is supposed to, I think they changed that in 90 just before I went through, and they softened it a little bit. But it used to say that the woman was to submit to their husband, period. And then they added, in righteousness, essentially. In 1990. I also missed the blood oaths by just about 6 months.
Oh, damn it.
I know. You pay the good money, and my dad warned me about it. And my parents, on the other hand, I'd never heard fight my entire life. Never raised their voices at each other. At me a few times for sure. But, the one time I ever heard them fight was the day I was getting ready to go to the temple for my own endowments, and my dad kind of pulled me aside in the hallway in our home, and he's like, you know, hey, I don't want to freak you out, and I don't want to scare you, but there's some stuff that goes on in the temple that's a little bit weird, and I just want to prepare you for that. And my mom, I remember her jumping out of the bathroom as she's getting ready, and just like, you know, she called my dad Stock. You know, Stock, you shut up. You know, what are you putting this stuff in his head? Really kind of tore into him. So I'm sitting there like, what the hell is going to happen in the temple? And my dad didn't realize at that point that they'd taken out the disemboweling and the slitting your throat ear to ear. Mm-hmm. I believe they took that out in April of 90, and I went through in October of 90. So yeah, just missed the fun stuff there. It's still plenty weird. It's not as weird as people hope, but it's
the church doesn't change. It's always been the same.
Right? Yeah, God's eternal, unchanging love.
Yeah.
This temple ceremony that's never mentioned in the Book of Mormon. Yeah, but it's essential for your salvation.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So went through the temple, and now I'm really jumping around because now we're back pre-mission. But that was an odd experience, though, to look around at otherwise, you know, fairly normal people that you grew up with in your neighborhood. All the adults, of course, none of my peers were there because I'm just beginning this part of a Mormon life, and so it's all the adults you've grown up with, and they're all standing around wearing these, you know, to your mind at that point, really bizarre kind of cult-like clothing. I'm sure you guys have seen it.
Yeah, and that's where I've always said, I'm like, when you get to that point of the church, I'm like, how do you not scream, this is a cult?
All right, fucking
I'm
out.
a fucking cult.
Well, I mean, that's how cults work. You know, they ease you into that shit, and then and that's why there's temple prep classes and everything. I think and you're doing invasive interviews with the bishop. And in my case, and in people that grow up LDS, your entire life. I mean, you're groomed from the cradle that this is how it goes, you know, and from your earliest memories, you're going to sit down with a relative stranger to discuss incredibly private parts of your life. And so, There's a really great book that I read, and God, I am jumping around a lot, but the Combating Cult Mind Control by Stephen Hassan. I read that when I was still Mormon, and I think just before I read Sagan. And he doesn't mention Mormons once. He's actually writing about the Moonies.
Okay.
But the similarities were so incredible to me when I read that book. I just thought, wow, this is what I've gone through, especially on the mission where you're with another member of the church 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
They're telling you what underwear you wear. They're telling you what media you can and cannot listen to. Your whole day, every single day is scheduled. Every 15 minutes is blocked out.
You're controlled.
Absolutely.
Limiting your contact with the outside world. Not even with the outside world in general, but even with your own family
and friends.
You call your mom on Mother's Day and call your family on Christmas were the rules when I went. Yeah. You could write letters, weekly letters. And then keep in mind, most people, in my case, their families were in it too. So everybody's playing the game together. And it's hard to see through that. So, interesting note, my mission president, one of the few radio shows we were allowed to listen to was Rush Limbaugh.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it's a wonder that I came out of this kind of a socialist leftist prick, you know. So I was indoctrinated back in 1992 with Limbaugh, back when he was still kind of fun to listen to. Now he's just a bloated windbag, but
yeah, back when every now and then you could go, he's making a decent point there.
Do you remember? You guys might be too young. Do you remember Bo Gritz?
I'm sure.
I'm only 33, so
Bo Gritz. I'm sure Ryan's too young. I think I'm 43. You're what?
45.
45. Yeah. So yeah.
So Bo Gritz, he was basically I'm trying to think of a current aspiring presidential candidate I would compare him to, but extremely far right. Gonna save the Constitution that's hanging by a string, that Mormon thing.
Hanging by a thread,
yeah. He came and he was allowed to speak to us as missionaries as well. So, yeah. Pretty interesting.
Glenn Beck.
Yeah. Pre-Glenn Beck, but that type of
rhetoric.
Yeah. I guess I was trying to lead up to how the mission actually helped because it got me to take it very seriously. I studied and I'm falling back on some of the experiences I had that affected me. But at the same time, I didn't have the fortitude to say like they're wrong. It's not me. And that's what I give Sagan credit for sure was, I'd been studying and really having questions, talking to everybody I could within the church, taking the proper channels, talking to stake presidents. I was the elders quorum, first president. It's been so long. I think this weekend is conference weekend, and I'm proud that I hardly can remember anymore.
It is this weekend, and the only reason that I know that it is General Conference weekend is because the Utah chapter of the Satanic Temple is doing something at the library, and part of the whole thing is hey, instead of having to deal with General Conference, you can come and hear a bunch of Satanists talk.
And living downtown, the only way I know is suddenly the tracks trains are full of people with white shirts and ties. It always takes me about an hour, and then I'm like, oh, yeah.
What the fuck is going on?
And South Temple has got, like, people walking all over the place, like... I'm gonna.
You want to avoid that area if you're living downtown. I try to get over to the Harmons, and I'm like, oh my god. Anyway, I got home. Talking to folks. I was married at this point. I'd been married in the temple, and there's an additional layer of pressure. Now I've eternally committed myself to this woman that really, really believes in the church, and I've made this commitment to her, and I'm big on that. I'm big on commitment. I still am.
Because then it's not just you that your choices are affecting, right? It's your partner, somebody that you've promised to be with, that whatever you do is also going to reflect and affect their lives.
Right. And in that community, especially back then, it felt like it was just going to destroy my life if I left the church. I mean, I was convinced if I left, I for sure I'm going to lose my wife. My family's going to disown me. I'm going to have no friends in the community. I'm going to be left alone. Was that what kept me in? No. I personally just kept thinking there's something to this, and I'm going to get it. And after, I think it was maybe 5 years of being married. No, that's not right. Maybe 2.5 years of marriage, is when I wish I remembered. It's such an important part of my life, but somebody turned me on to Carl Sagan, and it might have just been a TV show. and realizing he had the book and then going to check it out and
see a rerun of the Cosmos.
Yeah, something like that. But I remember as a kid also watching nature shows. My parents, that's what we did on Sundays is watch KUED and watch, the Animal Kingdom shows and we loved the nature shows and loved the science shows and everything. My dad is a scientist by trade. Which in hindsight always boggled me how you ever did this, but I'll get to that eventually. He's left the church now as well. But I used to have to do the mental gymnastics. Well, wait a minute. If the dinosaurs and things were real, then how can what they're teaching me at church be real? Or if, you know what I'm talking about there.
Yeah.
But anyway, read Sagan. And like we said earlier, he had such a gentle way about him he didn't make me feel threatened and made me feel like I was okay. And really he laid out the arguments in such a way that it was like, really comfortable with like, no, that is right. Like I'm not a crazy person. I'm not evil. That's how you think about things,
Well, the one story in that book that really sticks out in my mind is the invisible dragon in his garage.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that to me was the perfect analogy for how people think about the God that they believe in.
Yeah.
It's any time that there's a question that comes up where you could possibly disprove what they're saying, they just move the goalpost and say, oh no, well, my invisible dragon the dragon in my garage is invisible, so you can't see him.
Right.
Okay, well, can I touch him? I touch him? Well, no, it's incorporeal, so you can't really touch it. Well, does it breathe fire? Well, sure. Well, can it start a fire? Well, no, it doesn't really give off heat. It's a heatless flame, Like every possible question that you can come up with, they have some way of explaining it away. And I was like, that's perfect analogy for how people think about the God that they believe in.
Yeah. That might be all people need then. Maybe we should just print that up in a pamphlet and hand it out. That really was the catalyst for me too, was when he makes the point that, a dragon that I can't in any way prove is no better than not having a dragon at all.
Right.
And that's, then you realize that the same concept applies to God and in religion. It's that simple. There are times, I think for everybody, that you have your moments of like when my daughter was born, people said, oh, that's going to convert you back. I was already atheist at that point, but that you're going to know God is real when that happens. No. And I'll hand it to him. It's incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
But that does not imply a God.
Yeah.
And I cried like a baby. I cried for a week and definitely had feelings I'd never had before. But luckily I had, I wouldn't say prepared myself for that, but I'd gotten far enough along in my reading and once I realized, Sagan helped me realize that the church is the problem, not you. I had a Sunday afternoon. I was getting ready to go to church. Was a counselor in the first presidency of the elders quorum in the ward I was in. And I'm standing there putting on my tie in the mirror, looking at myself. And I remember looking myself in the eye and saying, you don't believe this stuff. And, I took my tie off, took off my shirt, put on shorts and a t-shirt, went and got on my mountain bike and rode around all afternoon. Had a great afternoon. I've honestly never looked back. I was done. It took him about 3 weeks to come find out what had happened to me, which was funny because I was a very active member, part of the leadership team.
You figure you would have gotten a call at home that night.
Right. Were you sick? What happened?
Yeah.
No, nothing. Then they came over and I'll never forget the guy, saying, we came to find out, why you haven't been to church and we just wanted to make sure that nobody had offended you. And I said, well, you just did. I said, if you think I would leave my religion because somebody offended me, that's offensive.
Yeah.
No, I'm not that type of person. And then I brought out glasses of water and set them down for the two guys that had come to visit me and said, go ahead and enjoy those. One of them's poison, but in the New Testament it says that true disciples of Christ can drink poison and survive, so that should be no problem. And they had this uncomfortable moment of like, is he serious? But yeah, they tried for a little bit. They don't like when you have intelligent arguments back, though. That's the one sure way to get the religious to leave you alone is to...
Well, I think most of the time they've never been confronted with any intelligent arguments. They've lived their entire lives in this religious bubble and have had nobody. I mean, if they had intelligent arguments presented to them more often, they probably wouldn't still be in the religion, right? So the first time they face them, it's, oh my God, what do? I have to run away now. I have no answer for these things.
Yep. Yeah, so left. My ex-wife and I stayed married for a few years until my daughter was born, and then that kind of pushed things. You know, we were okay, kind of cohabitating. She didn't love that I wasn't active in the church, or actually wasn't not only not active, but I considered myself non-Mormon.
Yeah.
Although that took me surprisingly long time to get around to officially doing, but then when my daughter was born, then those issues like baby blessings come up and baptisms and, you know, how are we going to raise the kids? And then, you know, I kept telling her, well, I'm not going to lie to my daughter. I'm not going to teach her stuff that I know is blatantly false. I don't want her to grow up being a racist with the Book of Mormon teaching that skins of darkness are a sign of displeasure of God, no matter how you slice that.
Yeah. There's no way to put a nice,
right.
Not only racist, but the book is sexist.
Yeah, it's all around a pretty horrible book. And boring on top of it all. But, so yeah, that day I left the church. Then we got divorced. I really didn't do anything that they think or that they tell you Mormons or ex-Mormons are going to do when they leave the church. It took me a few years to even have a beer.
You didn't start slamming heroin right away?
No, didn't do that. Didn't cheat on my wife. Didn't start drinking or smoking right away. I ended up doing that. But that wasn't why I left. I really had zero desire for that type of thing.
You didn't leave just to sin.
Right. Yeah. I left because of intellectual honesty. And I really, in hindsight, I lucked out. My parents, who I thought were going to be mortified and disown me. I remember telling them my younger brother was about to be married in the temple, and I wanted them to understand why I wasn't going to be there without assuming I'd committed adultery or whatever myriad of other sins I might have committed.
Well, so I don't mean to interrupt you, but at this point, I'm guessing your parents were aware that you weren't attending church regularly and everything. Did they just not? Was it something that they avoided talking to you about, or?
Yeah, and I think it all happened relatively fast. So I think it hadn't quite sunk into them. And, you know, obviously I was married and doing my own thing. I think they just assumed I was going to church every week. And I was too chicken shit to bring it up and tell them. Yeah. But there were probably some signs that they were like, okay, something's going on with him. But I pulled them aside one Sunday at a family dinner, and I just said, hey, you know, I want to let you guys know I'm not going to be going to the temple. I'm not going to be going to any church functions anymore. And I also want you to know it isn't because I'm a sinner. I just, you know, the church doesn't work for me mentally. And my mom cried, but she wasn't hysterical. She just had a few tears, and she gave me a hug and said, you know, we know you're a good person and we love you no matter what. And my dad kind of said the same thing. And, so that was incredibly lucky. And then a few weeks later, my dad and I were going fishing, and, you know, 5 a.m, driving down to a lake. And just keep in mind, this is my dad that raised me LDS. Yeah. He physically forced me to go to church a handful of times, like, you know, picked me up, dragged me out to the van. And he, you know, just kind of out of the blue while we're driving, just tells me, you know, I've always thought the church was horseshit too, basically. It's like I just went along to keep your mom happy, you know. You know, he brought up some of his doctrinal issues that had bothered him since his mission, but he, for what, you know, I have never really gotten too deep with him. I don't know.
Had he just put him on a shelf?
Yeah, I think he put him on a shelf, and I don't mean to say my dad's a great guy. But yeah, once he came out strong too, and within a month he wasn't, you know, wearing the garments and wasn't going to church. He missed his daughter's wedding because he was suddenly not worthy, because he wouldn't go to a temple, recommend interview, and tell him that he thought, you know, Joseph Smith was the true prophet and restored the true gospel. Yeah, and he was pretty upset. I remember at her wedding watching people that we all knew were, even by their own standards, less worthy than him, that were allowed to go watch his daughter be married in the temple, while he was excluded because he simply
was honest.
Had the integrity to say, I disagree with this. But he wasn't smoking, he wasn't drinking, you know, to my knowledge, wasn't cheating on my mom. Great dad, not abusive, you know, intelligent guy, took great care of his family, and is left sitting out in the flowers with us other heathens while my sister got married. Yeah.
So do you look at it as, when you made that decision, that you gave your father possibly the strength to finally say, I'm in the same boat? Or
Yeah. I definitely, I don't want to take all kinds of credit, but I think that's the case in my family. Is I kind of took that plunge, and then everyone realized, oh, I'm not going to die and be turned to a pillar of salt immediately. You know, I'm going to be okay. And so my brother that's just younger than me, has stayed in the church. Although it's superficial. He probably wouldn't appreciate me saying that, but I know that. And he's a little like my dad was, you know. But if you get him one-on-one, he'll talk to you about it and be like, I don't know about it, but doesn't want to.
Don't want to rock the boat, like it, no skin off my nose kind of thing.
Yeah, going to keep the wife and the in-laws happy, and you know, I don't need to stir up my family. And I don't know if I can respect that, but I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
My younger brother, he was kind of the real rebel, but he had always maintained that he did believe in it and would one day come back around. And then he finally had the courage to just be like, yeah, no, I'm not into this. Then one of my sisters left. And then my other sister to this day seems to be pretty devout Mormon. So her and my mom and my one faker brother are Mormon, and then my other sister, my brother, and myself and my dad are out of the church. So we're almost a 50-50 split.
Wow. How does that work for Christmas?
At this point, the religious in my family pretty much don't bring it up. They don't. We had a few interesting things when I was young, fresh coming out of the church might be a better way to put it. My little sister, this might be funny. I thought it was funny. We're sitting at a family dinner, and there, I don't know if you'd remember this from your upbringing in the church, but people would argue about who has to say the prayer, you know, over the meal. So there'd be this like, you know, I said it last time. Why don't you say it?
You would think everybody would want to do it, right? But instead it's,
fighting about who has to talk to their benevolent God. Yeah. And so I made that point. You know, I said, well, you know, if everyone loves God so much, why is it a fight to talk to him? Like, somebody do it. I'm hungry. And my sister burst into tears and ran down the hall.
Oh, man.
And so we had a few of those moments, and I really feel like we're lucky in a way that we've come down to our, I don't know. It's almost a non-issue for us now. Yeah. No one tries to push a prayer, and I don't feel like they feel like they're missing out on anything. I think I love it. I mean, my conversations with my family, with my parents in particular, for a while they were really guarded, and, you know, how's the weather? How's your job? Nothing really personal.
Kind of strained and
and
on edge.
As soon as we were all out and open about how we felt, now we are who we are. You know? And that, to me, it feels better, and it feels like it feels better to them. I certainly, with my dad, I know it does, and I feel like it does with my mom and my sisters and brothers. And
well, it always feels better to be more honest and just be yourself and not have to pretend you're something you're not the whole time.
Yeah, big lesson learned. Too bad it took me 23, 24 years, but...
This is Danielle Moscato, civil rights activist, trans woman extraordinaire, and public speaker. You are listening to Godless Rebelution, and I hope you enjoy the show.
We're going to take it, and we're going to take it hard, and we're going to take it strong, and I will work with overwhelming force. Everything in the butt. Hey.
So if the person you're contemplating voting for believes all that, believes that the Garden of Eden was in Missouri, believes that Native Americans are the lost 10 tribes of Israel, believes that Jesus visited North America. I mean, these beliefs are barking mad.
You and the Godless Rebelution will be reassimilated in 3, 2, 1.
I'm always really curious about LDS women who remain in the church, even doubly so when their husband has left the church. Because, I mean, you know, according to LDS teaching, that the husband is the one who has to attain the celestial kingdom, and then he can choose to call his wife to his side once he's there.
Right.
And so, you know, female adherents of the LDS faith can't reach the highest level of heaven by themselves. So how does your mom square that? Or do you think she thinks about it very much, or does it bother her? Or?
I honestly, I don't know. I don't think that she thinks about it much. I want to be a little careful and not say too much for her. My impression is that intellectually, I think she understands that the church isn't technically true, but I think that I think she views it as a good social club, and that it's, good for the community.
Mm-hmm.
All of her friends are in the Relief Society, things like that. And, I honestly think that for her, it's more of that. And she goes to the temple and she goes to church every Sunday and holds callings and all of those things. But I don't think that intellectually she actually believes it's literally true. I think she's like how I view a lot of Catholics. They're Catholic because, that's what my family is. But
socially Catholic more than anything. What I wonder too, if they, and I would imagine that a lot of people fall into this category, that they just figure their God is good and loving and forgiving, and if that's the case, then certainly it will all just work out somehow, right? It'll all eventually work itself out, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, my ex-wife was certainly that way. When I was still married to her and had left the church, we'd be up at night, and I'd be trying to discuss with her my concerns, and she would always the answer of hers. So I just believe that when I die, I'll be made to understand. I believe when I die, God will make this all clear to me, and that could never satisfy me. I'm like, well, why can't it make sense now? And you do. I got to a point where I realized I can't worship a God that wouldn't respect me for being honest and making the step. I'll be proudly resistant of a God such as the one depicted in the Bible and Book of Mormon. I'd rather be a freedom fighter. I'd rather be.
You'd rather be Korahor.
Yeah, I'd rather be in opposition to that God for sure.
Yeah,
without a doubt. So, but I mean that's pretty common in religion. Is like, I don't want to get too deep. Like you said, they believe that God is benevolent. When I die, it's just going to sort itself out, and I'll be okay. And keep wanting to say that, and that's fine, but technically it's not. But everyone can do what they want to do. Just keeps us in a lot of shit. If everyone would just, as you said, right, if they'd just be honest, we'd all be in a lot better spot. I'm sure you guys have probably spent plenty of time, like I have, fantasizing how much cooler the world could be without the Abrahamic religions in particular. How much further ahead we could be as a society and scientifically. And
that's where I love that episode of the cartoon with the dog and the baby. I just forgot the name of the cartoon.
Family Guy?
Family Guy.
Cartoon with the dog and the baby.
Well, it was an episode where Stewie's got his time machine, and him and the dog go into the future. They go to a different time zone, and it's like, where are we now? And Stewie's like, well, this is the future where God doesn't exist. So we've advanced significantly in society, and there's flying cars and people going through the tubes, and everybody's happy and everything looks all cool. And there's no fighting over God and technology, and like we're talking about earlier with the stem cell research.
Right.
Imagine there wasn't, when Bush had basically probably a little bit of religious objection to doing stem cell research.
Not a little bit of religious
objection. It was that's
the
pretty much
sole reason. Yeah.
But if you would have had that, I mean, that was 16 years ago, close to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in those 16 years of stem cell research, imagine the amount of cures we could have found or advances we could have in saving people that we don't have now because we've lost 16 years of research on it.
Yeah. Think about the great minds down in, back in the Dark Ages that were burned at the stake.
Yeah.
Or so terrified to say what they had learned that we don't even know about. We had the brave ones that did it, and
some were
thankful for them. Yeah. Yeah. And, that's a lot. I wonder what I would do. I like to think I'd stand up, but boy, when you're faced with, getting your ass kicked or being burned at the stake, I might convert pretty quick again. I don't know. I hope I wouldn't, but
you like to think that you would be able to stand on principle and just be like, look, man, if my life is worth anything, it's worth being honest with myself and everybody else around me.
Right.
And if a God does exist, then that God would respect me for holding that position. And so should you, as somebody who believes in a God who is kind and just and all-knowing.
Right.
And if you can't see that, then sure, go ahead and burn me at the stake, and then your God will be pissed at you for doing that.
Yeah. It's my crazy Christian friend on Facebook. He had posted a thing with scientists who are Roman Catholic. Galileo was on there. I'm like, I felt like typing in there, like, he only said he was Catholic, and then they killed him because he fucking wasn't, because he was defying the church. Then they made him confess and become Catholic, and they're like, all right, thanks for doing that. We're still going to kill you.
Yeah, how did that work out for Galileo?
It didn't. Not at all.
Yeah, I keep waiting to wake up from this weird dream where, religion rules the world and Trump is president. And
President Donald Trump, those are still three words that I have a hard time squaring in my mind as it's reality.
It still feels like a bad 80s movie.
Yeah. I gonna probably take some shit for saying this out loud, but I openly wept when he won. I remember hugging my son.
I was very close.
Yeah. I stood there in the kitchen and just cried and told my son, like, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on with the world, but holy shit. Like, and I told him, come and watch this. He's 15, so he's just kind of like, whatever, Dad.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, this is history. Whatever's going on right now is super fucking
This
bad.
is when we
and
get
you can
fucked.
say, like, oh, you liberal snowflakes, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm not, Dan probably knows well enough. I wasn't exactly a Hillary cheerleader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I voted for her, but at the end of the day, but I had my problems with her too. So for me, it wasn't so much about Republican or Democrat or liberal conservative. It was having watched Trump throughout the
It was trying to stop a monster from becoming president.
Yeah. And it was insane. And I'm the type of person that I always will try to give somebody, like, I've listened to Alex Jones' fucking show. I mean, I even give that crazy bastard a try. So, and I listened to a few.
Hey, I'm not crazy. You just don't understand. What are you, a globalist?
Vampires.
But I watched a few Trump rallies, and you'd realize he isn't saying anything.
No.
Nothing at all. Just, we're going to win. We're win.
Yeah,
American
win
nationalism. What? Yeah. Anyway, I digress. Just, back to the religion thing, I'm just, the same thing. I look at the world and I'm like, how are we still doing this shit? How
it's been 2,000 fucking years, man. Come on.
Of course, the happy stoner in me says we gotta step back and look at this from an evolutionary perspective and realize that our lifetimes are such a blip.
Oh yeah.
And we are in an incredible exponential arc towards better times, I hope.
Yeah.
It feels like right now we might be getting the stool kicked out from under us a little bit, but I think the big picture, we're still heading in the right direction. Trump will be in the bigger picture, he's going to be a blip on the radar.
True.
I hope.
but it's always easier to dump a gallon of oil on the floor than it is to clean it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking of that with his environmental things, that he wants to, deregulate stuff and get rid of stuff. I'm like, even though the impact, it'll happen quick, the longer lasting impact of having to reverse the effects of what he might enact.
Yeah. Excellent point. I think I worry about like social issues.
Yeah.
And maybe that's more where my mind was when I say that is there's things he's going to do, but I think the arc is towards the better.
Oh, definitely.
I hope so. It gets discouraging. I mean, I definitely have my moments of like, yeah, what the fuck? 2,000 years and we're still doing this shit, and we're still cutting off our babies' genitals, and we're still dunking kids, and what the fuck?
Ridiculous, superstitious nonsense.
Yeah. And I, as objective as I can be, I've never heard a satisfying religious argument anymore. They have to take advantage of you one way or the other intellectually. We were trained to do that as missionaries. It didn't feel like that when you're doing it. They couched it in a way that it's like, here are people that need the gospel more than anybody.
You're there to help people.
You're there to help them. So why don't you
not take advantage of the people who are down on their luck?
But then again, they didn't know they needed help until you showed up.
Right. We were absolutely encouraged to scan local newspapers. We weren't allowed to read the newspaper other than the obituaries and the birth announcements to know.
So going after the weakest or the people who are
in huge changes in life.
Yeah.
So here, I got a new baby. I'm kind of left wondering, well, what the fuck is this all about?
You're very emotional.
Every time. I mean, to this day, every conversation I have with missionaries ends with, okay, well, do you know of anybody in the neighborhood who's going through some hard times, who may be in need of some counseling and blah, blah, blah? Like, sure, but there's no fucking way I'm sending you over to their house.
Yeah. And in hindsight, God, I'm embarrassed again that I did that. We talked a little bit earlier about, the arrogance that comes along with being a 19, 20-year-old kid that has the audacity to go out and knock on people's doors and tell them that you
have the answer.
I have not only the answers, but like the answers.
Yeah.
Like I know about how the universe is working. I can tell you all about this. And like I said, here I am, a white kid from West Jordan, Utah, that has,
with the keys to eternity.
I've never really traveled. I have no idea about the rest of the world. At that point in my life, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that anything about Buddhism or Hinduism or any other religion. I didn't know anything about Baptists. I didn't know anything about Catholics. I was shocked the first time we knocked on a door and I asked the person if they'd heard of the Book of Mormon, and they said no. And I honestly didn't know how to respond. I was like,
well,
have you been living under a rock?
That's the way it was for me. Yeah. When I came here to Utah and they said, oh, I'm LDS. I'm like, what's LDS?
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're like, oh, it's Mormon. I've heard of Mormons. Are you a different sect of Mormonism? Like Baptist, Catholic, Lutheran type thing? Like, no, we're the same. Like, oh, why the two names?
Interesting to hear. I genuinely do think most Mormons are actually really good people. I really do believe that.
I do too. Yeah. I mean, there's some of the nicest, well, so last week when we had, Yvette, the Babe on, during our pre-show interview, she was talking about a friend of hers whose family is LDS, and her friend is not, but the rest of her family is, and she's like, oh no, all of the Mormons I know are some of the nicest and most wrong people you will ever meet.
Right. Yeah, it's true. And they can, I mean, they'll bristle if you bring up things like my ex-mother-in-law is that way. My son's now, I don't know if I'd call him defiant, but he's openly gay. And I wondered how that was going to fly with the ex side of the family.
Oh yeah.
And to their credit, they've handled it way better than I thought they would. They've been pretty accepting, but now he's to the point where he's looking at their side of the family and saying, well, wait a minute. And so he, asks some pointed questions, and they don't handle that very well. But, yeah, I guess what I was getting to was with your experience of coming here to Salt Lake and experiencing this cult, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a large, entire valley of a cult, so it doesn't feel like one anymore. But it must be odd to come into it.
Here in Utah, anyway. I mean,
and when you're in it, you don't realize how arrogant you are, because it's just how everybody does this.
Yeah. So. Just going out the first time someone asked me what ward I belonged to.
Right.
And the only time I ever heard of wards before was in Louisiana. I'm like, I know Louisiana has wards.
Right.
I'm like, you guys have, I'm like, what do you, I'm like, I live on base. Yeah. I don't think it's Taylor Air Force. It's not a ward. It's not like a 12th. They're like, oh, you're not LDS, are you?
Right.
You're not from here. I'm like, no.
You ain't from around these parts.
Did you ever get invited to the steak center?
No, I've never been. Well, when I first bought my house in North Ogden, my neighbor would always come over and talk to me all the time.
Yeah.
Until the day I was out in my yard raking with a beer.
Yeah.
And he looked at me, and he hasn't said but 2 words to me since.
Yeah. So maybe I'll take back the nice thing a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's some of that
nice
judgmental stuff
right.
where
they're nice when they think they can still get you.
Yeah. Or when they don't realize you're not Mormon.
Right. I'm about as bad as you can get. I mean, I could be gay and take it up one more notch, I think, but I'm an atheist, returned missionary, divorced, I'm a member of the Satanic Temple, which is fun. My mom didn't love that one. I had to try to explain to her, it's not what you're thinking. I
got my membership card in my pocket.
My current wife and I were married by my brother, who was ordained in the Dudist priest.
Nice.
And we had some of her aunt and her uncle were convinced that our marriage was invalid because of that. Is he a real preacher? And I was like, he's as real as any preacher. Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, that's something I've got to think about more. My Mormons are nice theory. I don't know. It's different kind of nice, because I don't consider it nice for somebody to question on your wedding day the validity of your marriage because they don't like your religion. And I'll agree with her on that point. Like, yeah, it's not really a religion, but really you don't want to have a religious wedding. That's the point.
Yeah.
Right. And it's my brother. I love my brother. He loves me. He loves my wife. It's better than a strange priest.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mind,
I mean, my sister was married by my brother.
Right.
And at my brother's wedding, he had one of his best friends marry him.
Yeah. It's the way it should be. My first marriage in the Salt Lake Temple was me with a bunch of relative strangers who were the members of my ward. Forgive me, standing around the adults who I really didn't have much to do with growing up. And most of my friends weren't considered worthy to be there. All of my siblings were too young to be there and hadn't, gone through the temple. And so it was me, my parents, her, and then, relatives and ward members, but none of our actual friends and siblings were there. And I look back on that now and I'm like, God, what a bizarre wedding experience, And your wife is sitting across an altar from you with a veil over her face. And somehow when you're in it, none of this seems quite as bizarre. And then you look back, you're like, wait a minute.
I've seen a lot of documentaries on cults, and it's a cult.
It's a cult. Yeah, it definitely is.
But it's so hard. I mean, it's so hard to realize that when you're in it. I mean, if it's the only thing you have nothing to compare it to, right?
And especially growing up in Utah, and in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, for sure. I mean, that's just what everybody where I grew up was LDS. Mm-hmm. It was the very rare person that wasn't, and they were definitely ostracized and in subtle ways, or not so subtle, but I couldn't sleep over at certain friends' houses because their dad was an LDS and drank beer, or smoked cigarettes or whatever. And for me, I kept realizing, God, these guys who the parents are so afraid of, are actually really great guys. They smoke, they have a beer, but they're actually interesting.
Not bad people.
They're honest with us kids. And it would always turn out that the more pious Mormon guys, not always, but often were the ones that were child molesters and all the other problems that come with that. So, really freaky to look back on.
Taking advantage of their position and
my wife now is, I guess, obviously not LDS. I wouldn't make that mistake again. And we talk about that a lot, though, how, it's kind of bizarre to think that we both feel like we had really happy, great childhoods. Our parents are wonderful people, all college educated. Her dad was a air traffic controller that just recently retired. So, not a slouch, not a non-intelligent guy, really kind, would do anything in the world for his children, has a lot of great hobbies. And you just I don't remember looking back. We celebrated Christmas, we celebrated birthdays. When I thought of a cult, it was people that were off on some compound doing some weird shit that we were normal Americans for all. we didn't drink coffee and beer and smoke cigarettes, but hell, that was just good for you. And that was, to me, that was like the most peculiar part of it, because you really don't grow up, at least I didn't, ever hearing about polygamy. They really did a fine job of hiding that from us.
Oh yeah, nobody in my LDS family talks about polygamy like that was ever part of the church's history.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think we vaguely knew, but it was kind of like, some people did that. And it was kind of a little, I think, what did Hinckley say, was a little quirk of our history.
Yeah.
Fuck you, man. Come on.
Except for all of your founders.
Little quirk of our history and our eternal life and afterlife. Yeah.
Yeah. So they do a great job with that. And then, they changed the doctrine on the blacks and the priesthood. Now they we just won't mention that anymore.
Yeah.
And going back to that experience on my mission, that isn't part of the discussions. So how fair is that to teach somebody who's African American about this religion? And we would have baptized this guy. I guarantee we would have taken him all the way to being a member of this church and collected 10% of his money, everything else, right? Without ever telling him that little quirk of our history.
Yeah.
That, by the way, prior to 1978, you couldn't have held any leadership position in this church.
You weren't worthy.
I look back on that and how shitty and arrogant that is, and I'm just like, oh, God, what a little monster I was. But I didn't feel that way. I didn't go around thinking like I'm a little bastard. But in hindsight, it's like, God, it's horrible to do that to somebody. So obviously, he would want to know that before making this decision. And same with women. How could the polygamy obviously doesn't come up in the discussion. So how could you let a woman join this church and then one day be like, oh, and guess what? We still technically do practice polygamy.
Yeah.
Just not here on Earth anymore, really.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't be telling you this, but there is a state where the marriage laws are a little looser. Utah.
Utah? Home of America's most powerful weirdos?
Our lives could be so wonderful there.
In Provo, Utah?
Why would I go to Utah? I love booze, caffeine, and monogamy.
Then that must be it.
So, how many brides will you be marrying today, Mr. Simpson?
Just one.
What are you, gay?
Hi, this is Justin Schieber, formerly of the Reasonable Doubts podcast and currently of Real Atheology, and you are listening to the Godless Rebelution.
I still feel sometimes the church is still segregated because on my street there's 2 LDS churches. One, if I drive by it on Sunday, has all white people at it. If I drive by the other one, it's all Hispanics.
Huh. Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe they have a Spanish-speaking ward.
They
that would
might.
be my suspicion.
But then why have I had them come to my house and ask me if I speak Spanish?
Because it's a Spanish-speaking
No,
ward?
because they're looking for people to speak Spanish in the neighborhood.
Oh, to whiten up that ward? Or?
I don't know. Or to go proselytize with them.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Indiana was in large part a lot like Utah. It's pretty white outside of Indianapolis. Indianapolis is there's a pretty substantial black community there, but out in the suburbs it was white as anything. So it just was kind of a non-issue, as dumb as that might sound. It just didn't affect me, so I didn't think about it too much. And yeah, to go back to that to me was the big catalyst of like just learning to be empathetic, I guess, and objective, and being able to step outside of who you are and say, how would I feel if I were this person? And it's treated me well my whole life. Now it's kind of my whole philosophy. How ironically goes back to the golden rule of supposedly Jesus, right? Like,
Oh, it existed way before Jesus.
I know that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
don't tell the Christians that you'll destroy their whole bubble.
Well, they invented morality, so
right.
They're the arbiters of morality. there was none before them.
So the first marriage ended just after your daughter was born. Was it all? I mean, was it a religious thing? Was it?
Yeah, I think primarily.
Yeah.
It got to a point where we just couldn't relate, and I couldn't respect her, to be frank, and I'm sure she couldn't respect me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd gotten far enough along with reading more and more philosophy, reading more and more about religion in general. And this is about the period of time where you would have known me in 94.
I remember when I worked with you that you were not exactly in the happiest of marriages.
Yeah. And I think we were both in that Mormon upbringing of you just kind of don't get divorced. And even though I'd left the church, I still had that working in my head. And honestly, about the time I'd really realized I need to get divorced and get going with my real life, I came home to ask her for a divorce, after having spent the day with some friends from AT&T, actually, up at the Snowbird Beer Festival. I didn't have a beer, but I realized how cool and fun it was to hang out with, sorry, Mormons, but, real people that were just honest and having conversations about whatever. And it wasn't all about, when you go to a family function, it'd be church, churchity, church.
Yeah, everything revolves around the church.
So-and-so got a calling. So-and-so did this.
Yeah.
I really had this epiphany of like, wow, my life could be this way. And I was going to go home and ask for a divorce. And I walked through the door. And it wasn't as if it was just that day, as Dan just mentioned, it had been coming.
Yeah.
But that was the catalyst, like, hey, I'm going to do this. And walked in and she said, I said, I need to talk to you. And she says, I need to talk to you too. And you probably see where this is going, maybe. And I'm like, well, you go first. And she says, well, I'm pregnant. Yeah. And I was like, boom. And then I was like, well, you can't be the guy that divorces your pregnant wife.
Oh.
So, and then she's like, what did you want to talk about?
I wish I would have gone first.
What did you want to talk about? And I'm like, the HOA called, they changed garbage day to Thursday. I can't remember what I came up with.
That sounds like a scene out of a movie.
It felt like one. Yeah, it really did. And then to be honest, when she was pregnant, that gave us something to kind of work on together.
Yeah.
It felt good again, and religion became kind of a side issue that didn't bother us too much. We talked about it a little bit, but then when Madison, my daughter, was born, it was, again, a goal we worked on together, and we had a few bumps where she got blessed I was against it, but I decided, well, it's all hogwash anyway. They can go ahead and do that. I was blessed, and here I am. So
yeah, go ahead and work your magic spells on my baby.
I'm not going to cause a big stink about it. And then, years went by, and then it just became more and more of an issue. And then for her, it probably was really word of wisdom problems because I started drinking beer. I can't even honestly. I drank in high school, so I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't have a big desire to go back. And then started drinking a little bit. I mean, by my standards today, I was a complete saint. I might have two or three beers a couple times a week. Yeah, maybe. And she hated that. And then my brother and I started home brewing, and that was even a bigger problem. Then I began working as a brewer, and that was an even bigger problem.
You're making the devil's juice.
I'm paying your mortgage with the devil's juice. So shut up. But then it got to the point where she, it's always hard to say with relationships. There a lot of other things were going wrong too. And then she started seeing an LDS family services counselor who advised her to give me an ultimatum. Which was, I couldn't have any alcohol or alcohol-related items in our home, and there was another stipulation.
I would have told that lady, "Fuck you! It's my house."
Yeah, that's basically what I did.
It's not about saving your marriage; it's about saving face for the church, right? And following religious teachings more than it is actually helping your family.
Yeah. And my ex bought into that, but to be fair to the church and to her, I also had. Intellectually, I'd strayed so far from her because I couldn't respect somebody who could say things like, "Oh, when I die, I'll understand," or who couldn't get their head around how the one of the Book of Mormon's main themes is just blatantly racist, and it can't help but get in your head. And I think I still struggle with that at this point in my life because it was ingrained from when I was born. That, skins of darkness, displeasure from God. Now, I don't believe in God anymore at all, but I wonder if I still have some of that residual horse shit that they forced into me for so long,
I think everybody does.
Yeah. And I wish I'd never had that. And, anyway, we got to the point where I just realized if I had gone on a date with her, even though we'd been married for 11 years at this point, if I'd gone on a date with her that night, I wouldn't have gone on a second date, and yet here I am married to you.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized I need to get divorced. And then as the movie continued, I wanted to get a divorce again. And then her, she got pregnant again with my son, kind of unexpectedly. And then her father passed away. And so that bought me another, 2 or 3 years of, not to be too big of a martyr, but, being the good guy, I guess, and trying to be there. How are you going to, good luck with the 2 young kids and
the dead dad.
Yeah.
Sucks to be you. I really wish I could be here to help you out. But.
And, to her credit, she's actually the one that filed for divorce because after the counselor did that ultimatum, or, told her to do it and she didn't. And she gave me a week to think about it. And the week was up and she came to me and I said, "Oh, hell no. I'm going to be who I'm going to be."
Yeah.
And it's not as if I had, Budweiser posters up around the house. We're talking about a guy that had a 6-pack of craft beer in the fridge.
Yeah. That would last a month.
Right. And then started home brewing a little bit. It would go to we kept all the shit at my brother's house, did it all in his garage. I'd go over there a couple times a month to brew. And then when I started working at Squatters, that got a little more complicated, but, anyway, thankfully she asked for a divorce and here we are. So,
you came out the other end being the good guy. No,
depends on who you ask.
I mean, he could have been the bad guy if he gave her the divorce when she had the first child.
Sure. Yeah. I wonder if we all would have been better off. You can always second guess yourself, I guess. But, who knows? It happened the way it happened.
Yeah.
And her and her family are all, seem to be pretty staunch LDS still. My daughter seems kind of indifferent. My son definitely is kind of coming around. He's living with me full time now, which has been nice. And So he's coming around. I don't know. I just, and I've kept the same philosophy, just be honest and empathetic with him. I'm not going to lie to him about things. And some might argue we have too honest and open of a relationship with him. Well, I don't think you can, though. I really don't. I think
that's the way it should be. I mean, you shouldn't hide stuff from them. You should let them know brutally honest. This is the world. I'm not going to shield you.
Well, and they should know
you're going to discover it someday anyways.
Yeah. And your kids should know that they can come to you for the truth.
Right. Yeah.
Or at least the truth as you know it, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have an answer for them, that you'll be honest with them and say, I don't know, but
That's another great Sagan lesson, right?
Yeah, let's find the answer together. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and also just getting to be yourself, because who wants to live life miserably as, artificially as faking some sort of life to make someone else happy where
surprising how many people
do it. And I feel sad for them where the people are just doing it to make someone else happy. It's like, you can be happy on your own as well and just be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
It's funny. I've heard stories from multiple couples where they stayed together and stayed faking being good little Mormon LDS people, going through the motions, going to church, doing all of this, and each one of them secretly thinking that it wasn't true, but doing it for their partner, thinking that their partner was all in, not knowing that their partner had the same doubts and issues. But then as soon as one of them said anything, it was like instantly everything falls away and you're like, oh my God, why didn't we do this sooner? Why if only we had been honest with each other.
Right.
And open.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I definitely don't want to out anyone that doesn't want to be outed, but I'm constantly surprised by how many people will tell you in privacy. I kind of agree with you. Church seems like it's horseshit, but I'm going to stick with it because of this, and this. And like I said earlier, I can't say that I respect that, but I can understand that, and I'm not going to be the one that's no, they said the church isn't true, but I'm constantly surprised by how frequently that happens.
I wonder how many people are in that situation, and also in the situation where they stay with it because they've already dedicated so much of their life to it. They're like, well, I don't want my life to have been a waste, so let's just stick on this path.
That whole sunk cost fallacy where I've spent so much time and money in this, I might as well keep going in case.
Yeah. I think, and not to stroke you guys off too hard, but I think that's why what you're doing is so important. And me being as much of a loudmouth as I am, I've been, like Dan obviously is one example of somebody that I didn't have any idea at the time had any influence on you at all.
Huge influence.
Well, had zero idea. And people tell me all the time, oh, why bother? Everyone's set in their ways. Why bother arguing? Why bother talking about it? Everyone's got their own way of thinking and they're not going to change. And I say horse shit to that. People do change. It's not often, not as often as you hope, but God, you never know. I've had, a handful of people now, get back in contact with me and be like, thanks for being open and honest.
Yeah.
Thanks for just saying it out loud and not being afraid. And at the time, I didn't think I was getting through to anyone. That's how I feel now when I argue politics online. Probably not getting through to anyone.
But the other big part of that though too is the realization that for every person that you're talking to, especially online, for every person that you're talking to and that you're arguing with online, there are 10 to 100, maybe 1,000 people just in the wings watching.
Yep. Yeah.
They're reading the comments. They're thinking about the arguments back and forth. They're evaluating who is being more intellectually honest, who's doing more honest overall.
Calling.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just who is presenting better arguments and who is being honest and open with what they believe versus having to create excuses for the things that they want to believe or have been taught their entire life.
Yeah. I'm sure you get that, like I do too, that, people will direct message me and be like, hey, good job on that argument, or I really respect how you didn't lose your shit and call people names or whatever. And, I try to do that. And this isn't to brag or be boastful. I guess I just would want anyone listening to realize it is important. I don't think you have to be in people's faces. I am a little bit, a little bit more than average maybe, but my main thing is I don't go on attacking people, but if somebody's saying something and they're being public about it, I have no problem counteracting that. But I'm not going to go knocking door to door and be like, hey, by the way, church is horse shit. You want to talk about that?
But you're also not going to sugarcoat your response to make them feel better about it. You're going to be, I mean, sometimes you just have to be brutally honest with the person about the way you feel and how you view things.
And I think there's a way to do that, to be brutally honest and still respectful and kind. That's hard. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's really tempting to go down that name calling route sometimes. So, and I'm sure I've been guilty of it, but I do think it's important that, that marginalized people like atheists, and I mean, look at the gay movement now and where they're at. I wouldn't say that the whole battle is won, but I can't believe how far it's come in my lifetime.
Oh yeah. Are you kidding me? I mean, shit, I can remember when I was a kid in grade school and it was, oh, you faggot this, you faggot that, you're gay, no, like that was a part of my daily life as a young kid. Yeah. And now
I ran into a kid we used to taunt on the bus, when and it was weird. It wasn't outright just because he was gay, but it was it was like, no, it was because he was gay. And I ran into him at a bar a couple of years ago and just had to apologize. And it wasn't me alone doing it. It was just the whole crowd on the bus. And I just told him, God, I feel horrible about that.
We were stupid.
Yeah, we were stupid. And frankly, we were raised in a religion that taught us that you were shitty. I mean, my mission president over the pulpit at his own conference advocated physically assaulting gay men. So not just for nothing, but if they flirted with you, or made any sort of advance toward one of the missionaries, then he told us we were well within our rights to go, beat the shit out of them. So
wow.
Well, I got a guy I work with who on Facebook quite often throws out a lot of homophobic slurs.
Mm-hmm.
So at work, I make it a point to hug him and rub up on him all the time and pretend I'm just trying to cuddle with him, and he really doesn't like it. As a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, we had to go to the other fire station. I'm like, oh, is so-and-so working today? They're like, oh, no, he's not here. I'm like, fuck, I wanted to go strip naked and take a photo on his bed and send it to him.
Well, it's tough. My brother, who I love dearly, and he loves my son too, but it's so ingrained into him. I don't think he says like gay or faggot I don't think he thinks of it all the way through to that end. Like that's not what he means. It's still insulting. I'm still learning, to come to grips with that. My wife's been great for that with me, to help me understand, like, I used to be more of the opinion that words didn't really matter. So, I could throw around slurs, whether it was racial or whatever, because I'm not racist, right?
Mm.
Or I love gay people, so I can say that. I can say faggot.
Yeah.
I can say gay and queer or whatever, and not mean it, because I don't mean that. But
if you know me, you'd know that I don't mean it.
And now when I hear now having a gay son and then hearing my brother, just conversationally, like, oh yeah, that guy was such a fag, and I know what he means.
Yeah.
And then now I have to stop him and be like, hey, Kyle, your nephew's gay, and he's like, oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So, well, not that kind of fag.
Yeah, no, and he's doing a great job. And I think we have to, have to be sensitive to that everybody's on their journey. And as long as people are trying and not, kicking back about that. I'm guilty of it too. Like I said, I still do it. I mean, my wife still catches me and like, my one right now is to say, retarded, and I'm starting to realize how that isn't super cool. And, I don't know. Maybe that makes me the little snowflake or whatever, but I'm like, I'm fine with that. I'm happy to be a snowflake.
Yeah. I did see a video with a guy that has Down syndrome. He's on YouTube. He's been in a bunch of movies and stuff. He does some comedy things. And it was when a movie was coming, The Ringer with Johnny Knoxville was coming out.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
He got on there and he's like, I don't care if you call me retarded, because guess what? I'm fucking retarded. Look at me.
Right.
I'm like, okay, that's funny.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm still a little torn on it. It is funny. I know.
I think it all depends on context. I mean, if you're mocking somebody for doing something stupid and calling them retarded, that's, that's one thing. And it's something completely different to say,
he has a mental retardation or whatever. I mean, it might not be a correct context. I mean, it's a very broad term to say, but
Yeah, I don't know. Language is slippery and tricky, and I think way too many people aren't charitable in how they view when somebody says something, when somebody misspeaks or they say something and they'll instantly jump on them and attack them. Well, you're not being as nice or kind as you should be, and this is harmful because of this, and this, and this. And, you can provide a bunch of counter examples to, okay, well, what about this and other scenarios? And, it's, I don't know, life is nuanced, and so many people fail to realize all of the nuances, and they're far too quick to judge people for things.
Right.
Yes, we should try to not be an asshole as much as possible, but if you are, be charitable in your views of people. Try to understand that everybody's on their own journey, man. Everybody's trying to do the best they can.
Yeah.
It's the people that when you say, hey, like if you're talking to your brother, hey, Kyle, your nephew's gay, and he would be, yeah, well, I can't stand those faggots. Then that's when you should have a problem with him, right?
Yeah, absolutely would too. Yeah. So yeah, it's I blame a lot of that on religion too, though.
Oh yeah.
I blame everything on religion. Everything bad.
This is Matt Dillahunty, and you're listening to the Godless Revolution.
Just because they're offended by someone being gay, it doesn't mean they're right. It's a strange thing that comes out of that being gay is a choice. No, being gay isn't a choice. I want to go, well, go, and you try it then. If it's a choice, have a go. See how much you like it.
Okay, we say we came across this murder site, and we're just cleaning it up.
Who cleans up murder sites?
I don't know, we're Mormons.
Mormons don't clean up murder sites.
Mormons are helpful.
Why don't you accept this wonderful offer? Why wouldn't you like to meet Shakespeare, for example? I mean, I don't know if you really think that when you die you can be corporeally reassembled and have conversations with authors from previous epochs. It's not necessary that you believe that in Christian theology, and I have to say it sounds like a complete fairy tale to me. The only reason I want to meet Shakespeare, or might even want to, is because I can meet him any time, because he is immortal in the works he's left behind. If you've read those, meeting the author would almost certainly be a disappointment. But when Socrates was sentenced to death for his philosophical investigations and for blasphemy, for challenging the gods of the city, and he accepted his death, he did say, well, if we are lucky, perhaps I'll be able to hold conversation with other great thinkers and philosophers and doubters too. In other words, that the discussion about what is good, what is beautiful, what is noble, what is pure and what is true could always go on. Why is that important? Why would I like to do that? Because that's the only conversation worth having. And whether it goes on or not after I die, I don't know. But I do know that it's the conversation I want to have while I'm still alive. Which means that to me, the offer of certainty, the offer of complete security, the offer of an impermeable faith that can't give way, is an offer of something not worth having. I want to live my life taking the risk all the time that I don't know anything like enough yet, that I haven't understood enough, that I can't know enough, that I'm always hungrily operating on the margins of a potentially great harvest of future knowledge and wisdom. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I'd urge you to look at those of you who tell you, those people who tell you at your age, that you're dead till you believe as they do. What a terrible thing to be telling to children. And that you can only live. And that you can only live by accepting an absolute authority. Don't think of that as a gift. Think of it as a poisoned chalice. Push it aside, however tempting it is. Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Thank you to everybody who has rated the show on iTunes and Stitcher and are following us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And to all our Patreon patrons, you make the show possible.
So you're working at Squatters now as the Brewmaster.
Yep.
What does that entail, actually?
Well, day to day, I mean, it's deciding which beers we're going to brew at the pub. I don't want to come across like I'm taking credit for all of Squatters or Wasatch for sure. Any of those guys listening, but at our pub, it's deciding what beer is going to come on seasonally, ordering ingredients, a lot of meetings, employee training. Ironically, a lot less brewing once you have the title Brewmaster. So I have an assistant who's great. His name's Connor, great guy. So if you come there and have a really good beer, ultimately he's probably the one you should pat on the back. I mean, we're to the point now we've worked together for 5 years and we really develop recipes together and have a pretty good, trusting working relationship in that regard. So. And then, being on the hop rising bottle, I get shipped around. I'm doing all kinds of stuff I never thought would come out of, being a brewer. I go on sales trips with the company. I'm now teaching classes for the University of Utah's continuing education program.
Teaching classes in brewing or business management stuff, or what do you?
It's we do a beer pairing. So it's just like a rudimentary education on beer and flavor. So I actually just taught that last night, and they come in. We go over the basics of the brewing process, do a tour of the brewery, and we run through and do tastings of our beers that are on draft and discuss the differences in the styles and try to help people understand like the difference between hoppy, malty, bitter, roasty, chocolate, and then I'll teach that same class next Tuesday. They'll come back in with that knowledge, and then we'll pair the beer with different foods and just try to help people understand that beer is better than wine in that regard. Well, and it is. I mean,
we have a lot bigger selection.
Yeah. Beer is insanely diverse. It's another little cliche saying I have is if people say they don't like beer, I just say you haven't tried the right one yet. Yeah. There's so many different types of beer, Creek Lambic, sweet tart cherry flavor to dark roasty stouts to hoppy pale ales and everything in between. So
I know what my least favorite brand of beer is, but also what style. What is your least favorite beer?
Oh boy, that's
like what beer would you rather just no thanks?
Honestly, Coors pass. Original.
Yeah,
I understand people like that one, the banquet beer.
Yeah.
It actually has kind of a cult following for my palate. Every time I've tried to drink that stuff, I just can't get it down. And I keep trying. I've got brewer friends that I respect that love that beer. They think it's great. And,
Coors has never been a bit of the two major brands, Coors and Bud. I'm definitely a Bud guy.
Yeah, I started off a Bud guy. I can still drink Bud and Bud Light.
That's my golfing beer.
Yeah, my wife drinks PBR. I mean, that's her nightly beer. I can't really drink that anymore. I don't get hangovers unless I drink shit beer.
Yeah,
and then the next day I'm just hurting.
Yeah.
But if I drink beers made with good ingredients, I'm fine. I mean, I can push that too far, but in general, I'm fine.
So what is your least favorite style of beer?
I don't really have a least favorite. It's so situational. You're asking like least favorite, and it's funny. I most often get asked, "What is your favorite?"
Well, that's later.
But no, it's kind of the same answer. It depends. My least favorite on a hot July afternoon would probably be like, Russian Imperial Stout or barley wine or anything kind of warm, like a warm English pub ale.
So you like all the styles. It's just situations.
I think I can really say I like
environment,
all
circumstances.
Styles, at some level. I'm not terribly fond anymore of, German style hef, that'll have the clovey banana kind of flavors to it. I can understand that. Lately, I'm not too fond of it.
Yeah.
I used to not be a hophead, ironically, but I now love hops. So I go through waves. When I first got into craft beer, I wouldn't drink anything that wasn't super dark. It had to be dark and manly and rich, and then I went through a phase where I just wanted Czech pilsners, and I still love those. But yeah, I jump all over the place. For me, it's really situational. So, people ask, what's the best beer you've ever had? Best beer would be Miller High Life, the champagne of beers. But that was after finishing a 20-mile mountain bike ride in Moab. It might be the first beer I had after my mission. I'm pretty sure it was.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I was mountain biking with some buddies. Lost my water bottles on the trail. Got back to the truck. All he had in his cooler, he opened it up. It was like a commercial, and Miller High Life laying there in the ice, crystal cold.
I'm thirsty.
Yeah, I had thrown my mountain bike off to the side of the road and walked the last 100 yards to the truck. I was like
staggered to the truck.
Done with all this shit, and saw that and was like, fuck it, give me one of those, and cracked it open, and that cold.
Oh my God, this is the best thing
beer
in the
I've
world.
ever. And then, in hindsight,
just in slow motion, it pouring in waves down your throat.
Right. Then I've tasted some English barley wines that have, just blown my mind. Just so incredibly flavorful. But yeah, just super situational. Yeah. I mean, Cutthroat's hitting the spot right now. Haven't had one in years. So.
I think my least favorite style of beer is any kind of smoked beer. I can't do them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just...
Yeah, those are challenging. I've had some good ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have yet to have a good smoked beer. Like, it's always just like licking a log.
Yeah.
licking the charred remains of a fire you built the night before is every smoked beer that I've ever tried.
Yeah, and I'm really fond of Belgian sour and like.
I love those. Yeah,
and a lot of people aren't. They can't.
Oh, those are so good.
Yeah, the sour, the funk, the barnyardy flavors people don't get. I love those. I'm pretty equal opportunity beer drinker.
Beer drinker.
Yeah.
Yeah. An ex-girlfriend of mine, her father had a saying that there are only two kinds of beer: good beer and very good beer.
Yeah.
And I said that for years and years, while I was still young and partying. And then after I got out of my really young and partying years, I said there are three kinds of beer: good beer, very good beer, and Keystone.
Yeah.
Keystone's the one brand that I just can't drink.
Yeah. Yeah, Coors is the only one I've found that I really, well, if you get into like Michelada, I don't like that stuff. Bud Light Lime, pretty bad. I don't like Shock Top. So yeah, I mean, I could start pulling some out that I wouldn't choose to drink if it was the only thing available. I'd probably have one.
If I was on a deserted island and a crate washed up, I suppose I'd drink it. But yeah.
I love all beer. I mean, I find myself drinking IPA on the day to day now, which I didn't used to. I used to be more of a lager. Provo Girl Pilsner was my go-to beer for the longest time, and then
that's a good beer.
Yeah, we don't make it anymore. Yeah. Now we have the Squatters from Squatters, which is meant to replace that one, so it's still German style Pilsner lager. So
the Squatters, is that I'm guessing that's a portmanteau of Squatters and.
You would think so, wouldn't you? Yeah. That would make the most sense. No, it came out as just a Squatters brand. And they, one of my good friends, Chopper, that works there as well, he's the face on that one. And he's just got kind of, what do they call it? The neared, the neck beard. Shaves his face, but only grows the neck. And I think they were trying to come up with like almost a new character, for the
label.
The beer. And so he's got that furry kind of look, and he kind of had it, tried to play off of the Sasquatch. And I don't know why they didn't do that. It would have been better to sell it as a collaborative between Wasatch and Squatters, which it may as well be. We're all one company now.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Well, tell us a little bit about the history about that. I mean, I know Squatters and Wasatch were two local breweries here in Utah.
Yeah. So Squatters started in '89 with Jeff Polychronis and Peter Cole. Started Squatters Pub downtown, and then Greg Scherf started the Wasatch Brew Pub in Park City in '87. And I might get my dates wrong a little bit here, but I want to say in about 2000, those three came together and formed the Utah Brewers Cooperative, and that's the brewery on 17th South and 3rd West, the beer store. Mm-hmm. And so the guys there would brew either brand interchangeably, but the ownership of the companies was still, technically separate. So Greg was in charge of the Wasatch side, and Peter and Jeff in charge of the Squatter side. And then I guess it was about 5 years ago, they brought all that together. And so we're officially one company on paper now. They opted to keep the 2 brand identities. So I technically work for Salt Lake Brewing Company now, but I still identify with the Squatter side, I guess, realistically, just because my whole career has been at the Squatters Pub downtown. But yeah, love Wasatch beers. I mean, I drink Ghost Rider White IPA pretty much every day now.
So, yeah?
Yeah, it's one of my go-tos.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that one. I'm trying to think of... I like the full... If I'm doing a session beer, I really like the full suspension.
Yeah,
that's a delicious beer.
A classic.
On a hot, sunny day.
We're really lucky in Utah. I mean, for some reason, we've got a lot of really great beers. I mean, I live...
Which is odd for Utah.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way, but then you think about it, and it's whenever you have kind of an oppressive...
It's the counterculture side of it.
Yeah. Just like we have a pretty good music scene here, too.
Yeah.
Got a lot of friends in really good heavy metal bands, like can stand up worldwide, and they do. I mean, they tour internationally, and they're from Salt Lake, and you're like, wow. And then you think, like, okay, they grew up under the thumb, and so
they got
in a way, maybe we should send the church a thank you note, like, thanks for inspiring all the delicious beverages, and look at all the distilleries popping up.
Yeah,
it's just insane.
I mean, Ogden's gotten 2 in the last 5 years, I think.
I honestly don't know all of the new breweries that have popped up just in Salt Lake. There's, Fisher just came on, Roja's coming on soon, Two Row, Shades of Pale, Proper. And then you had the kind of the old guard, which is, you went to Red Rock, Squatters, Wasatch. Then Epic came on the scene, 8-10 years ago, I guess.
I even like the Moab stuff.
Yeah.
I got some.
Yeah, then you've got
their
Moab.
Was it brown? This is their brown nut.
Nut brown ale.
Not brown ale. Yeah, that's what I usually like from them.
Yeah, Moab's great, but yeah, really thriving beer scene here. It's pretty awesome. And Salt Lake, I mean, as you guys know, is in general, Salt Lake proper is pretty liberal.
Yeah.
Easy.
It's our liberal bastion here in the red state.
For sure.
Yeah.
Not we can go back to the church thing a little bit, but like where I live, it's almost a non-issue to me in my day-to-day, interacting with people. If I am interacting with Mormons, I don't know it day to day, where when I lived in Sandy, that was very different. I had to deal with people being a little more intrusive than they are down in the Marmalade district.
That actually reminded me about something I was thinking about yesterday, that I know a lot of young atheists who are very much, social justice warriors. They recognize that they have privilege that other people don't. They know what privilege is. And as soon as you start talking about religion with them, they tune out and turn off, and they're like, no, it's okay. People can believe what they want. And I started thinking about this yesterday, that so many of the younger atheists here in Utah, and that I know in general, don't realize that they're privileged in having that idea in their head, right?
Yeah.
That, I mean, when you and I were kids, you kind of touched on it a little bit before, but, my family wasn't the going to church every Sunday and serving callings kind of family. And so even though we were LDS and went to church fairly regularly, me even being a not as worthy LDS kid couldn't play with some of the other LDS kids. They couldn't stay at my house because we didn't go to church every Sunday, or my parents didn't hold church callings, or because my dad smoked or whatever, And then I can remember that even within that pecking order, there were the kids below me who weren't LDS at all. They were the Catholics, the Jehovah's Witnesses who lived across the street and were weird, and don't go and talk to them because they'll tell you Santa Claus isn't real.
Right.
But, and so when we were kids, like, religion played this really big part in our daily lives and was really shitty to a lot of different groups of people. And now it's not so much that here in Utah. I mean, I know it still happens, but for my kids in particular, that hasn't really been an issue. But I've noticed a lot of people of that age, like around my kids' age, have this idea that no, people can believe what they want about religion. It's no big deal. And it really struck me the other day that I was thinking about it that, wait, you're this social justice warrior person who is quick to call everybody out for every other thing in the world. And you're an atheist, but as soon as an atheist calls out a religious person for doing something, untoward or that you can just say that their religion in general is harmful, you're pushing back on the atheist who's saying that versus the religious person. And it's because you have that privilege now. You have the privilege of being raised in a world where religion wasn't an oppressive thing for you, so you don't recognize it as a threat.
Yeah. Interesting point. Yeah. I definitely agree with you. I think religion is just evil, frankly, and I think you have to be a little careful in your phraseology sometimes. And so I can understand people being like, well, but I do not think we have to respect everybody's beliefs.
No.
Yeah. And I'm very, very quick to try to point that out. And I think you're right. I think it's not me personally per se, but it's been a hard fought battle. It's hard fought gains. And then we get complacent and like, oh, it isn't that bad anymore. But yeah, give them an inch. And let's watch what Betty DeVos does.
Yeah.
That scares the shit out of me to see the direction we seem to maybe be heading with public education again, and we just barely got out of that.
Yeah, and they're never satisfied. I mean, they don't want only equal footing with everybody. They want to rule everything.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the danger. I don't even know what to say other than fully agree. Trying to find that spot though between. Yeah, you can be Muslim if you want. You can be Christian if you want. Have a hard time telling somebody they can't do that. But at the same time, I think separation of church and state are paramount.
Yeah.
And we don't have that, but that's what I would fight for. You can go do your dumb religious shit on your own property until you start hurting your kids or your wives or one of us, by all means go have your fun. But, yeah, I don't know. That's my biggest frustration. It's probably in part why I'm here tonight. I hate religion.
Yeah, I always look at it.
I don't hate religious people. Let me clarify.
Yeah.
I love my mom. I love Mormons. I hate Mormonism.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you guys get that. Obviously, I just want to clarify. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I love Muslim people. I'm happy to have people who've been, or Islamic come to the United States. I'm not terrified of that any more than I am Christians. Now,
I'm more afraid of the Christians than I am the Muslims, honestly.
Well,
as far as refugees go, I mean,
yeah.
Here in the U.S., you're more likely to get shot by a Christian than a Muslim, anyways.
Yeah.
It's a numbers game, but I don't know. It bothers me that I see people doing that now. Where, wait a minute. I've fought pretty hard over the last several years to make sure that you now live in a world where that isn't as big an issue to you. So don't tell me that it's perfectly fine for people to believe whatever they want to believe.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine for them to believe whatever they want to believe in their own homes, on their own time, and without forcing other people to live by those beliefs.
Right.
You can believe whatever fucking nonsense you want in the privacy of your own home, in your churches, in your little social groups and clubs and whatever, where you all worship some invisible sky wizard. I don't give a fuck. That doesn't bother me at all. I'm bothered when you try to enforce those beliefs on other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even that gets tricky though. I mean, where do we draw the line? Can that parent then indoctrinate their children with this horse shit who really didn't get a choice?
Yeah.
I don't personally, I want to lean on saying, no, they shouldn't be able to. It's a form of child abuse in my mind.
I think so too.
And that's going to get me into, some sticky conversations, obviously. but I do feel that way. I won't apologize for that. I think religion is the single worst thing going in the world.
Well, I think especially when you have the parents that are homeschooling their children and just giving them a religious basis of their education, then when they enter the real world, they're stunted because that's not how the real world works.
And those kids end up affecting the real world.
Yeah.
If I raise my kids in a more destructive cult than like say Mormonism, but one that where we get people that are doing jihad or sending their kids out to do suicide bombers, or I raise them to be so angry about abortion that they go to an abortion clinic and shoot the doctor.
Yeah.
Or the nurses or what have you, then where do you draw the line between you can have your little fantasy and that's fine? Part of me, I should just probably shut up while I'm behind.
No, you're absolutely right though. I mean, and I guess I could extend what I said earlier to say, believe what you want in your own home and churches and little social groups and whatever, as long as you're not harming other people, including your own children. Yeah. But that is really tricky because I think even teaching children about hell is a form of child abuse.
Sure. And if you teach your children that homosexuality is an abomination, and then how are they going to treat my son in the real world? Yeah. So, I am not smart enough to have the answer on that one, that's for sure. But it goes back to our earlier comment. You wish you had a time machine somehow and could go back and just, somehow stop it all. And you think about how much better off we would just be overall. And people argue, oh no, we would have no morals and all this. And it's
you wonder, would you kill Jesus or leave him alive, or would you kill him earlier?
Go back and take care of Abraham.
But I mean, even when you say that though, I just, in my mind, I'm like, okay, you go back and you stop Christianity from becoming a thing. Then you come to the future again. It's going to be a completely different religion. They're going to have invented another religion, another deity to follow by a different name, but probably have the same circumstances.
Or maybe you just go back in time and present really good arguments against the type of shit that's going on.
Yeah, then they kill you.
A good point.
They burn you at the stake or behead you or put you on a cross and nail you to it.
Maybe that's when we need to remember we are on an arc and in time, not Noah's. But, history, it's been a shit show and it still is, but it is getting exponentially better. And with communication, it's not fast enough for us in our lifetimes, of course. I feel like that the risk of sounding incredibly arrogant, I think I've got that part figured out. That's horseshit. And if everybody could just leave that alone and then let's focus on real solutions, let's focus on science, let's focus on real morality. Yeah. I know that's just a fantasy. I don't see any way to do that other than we keep fighting the fight and be kind and suffer through it.
When you're talking about the arc, I was watching a show the other day. I can't remember the guy's name and I wish I could. It was about the history of comedy, and it was about a comedian in the 1950s who had been jailed over and over and over again for making jokes against religion.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was jailed for making fun of religion.
Yeah.
Now that's like a Jim Jeffries. That's all he there's so many comedians that half of their stand-up is bashing religion.
Yeah.
That in the 1950s, they would have been jailed and fined for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And people like us
would have been shot in the street.
Yeah. And, hopefully it won't come to that, but it could happen again. And we, kind of touched on earlier talking about what would you do? Would you burn at the stake, or would you go back on what you really believe? And I guess that's why it's important to stick to it, is to think about those future generations. And again, I don't know that I have the courage when push came to shove. I don't know what I'll do. I hope I'll go to jail for my honest beliefs. I hope I won't back down. I'd rather look my kids in the eye and say, I went to jail for that. And I kind of feel that way about marijuana. I'm like, I do not think it should be illegal, and I don't want to sit and act like it should be and act like I'm afraid of the police. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, I kind of am. Kind of don't want to go to jail for this, and I don't want to not be able to get a job. I don't want to.
Yeah.
So, society sets us up in that way where there's things that are, to my mind, obviously not immoral, not bad, not harming other people that we can go to jail for. I can be put into a fucking cage for having a plant.
Yeah.
And at one point in this country for having this bottle of beer, I could have been put in a cage. How does that make any sense?
Yeah. It doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah, I know. and yet there's the laws, and we look at our lawmakers, and it's just so frustrating to to live in a community like Salt Lake where you feel like everyone around you agrees, and then Jason Chaffetz wins by a wide margin.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm so frustrated by the politics here because
fucking gerrymandering.
Yeah, gerrymandering. What do we do about it? You know, I don't know. You know, bitch and keep voting, I guess.
Well, we could burn them at the stake.
Yeah.
I think you just keep speaking truth to power, and I don't know. I mean, the louder the chorus of voices, the easier it is to speak.
Well, and the shitty thing is they just got voted in again. They're making these laws that everybody in the state are fucking hating now. Then when it comes time for election, they'll calm that shit down. They get fucking reelected again. It's like
people have really short memories.
Keep reelecting people. Then after you reelect them, they keep fucking raising taxes and doing this shit. And you're like, oh, we need to get them out of office. But then when you have the chance, you don't fucking do it.
I think that politics in our country has just become more like a sport. And, you know, people pick a team and then they're going to defend that team.
Yeah,
period,
no matter what.
And that goes for both sides, I think.
Yeah.
I think, well, I'm liberal, so of course I think it's more on the Republican side, but who knows? I've got people that look at what I think and like, you just whatever the liberal media says, you're going to believe it, and blah blah blah. And so,
as opposed to what, Alex Jones or the fucking president,
right?
Well, but then again, like you even said earlier, you didn't fully agree with everything Hillary was doing or fully agree with her, but you still voted for her.
Yeah.
Where you will have people that are like, no, I 100% agree with everything Trump says.
Yeah. That's insane.
It's like, how is that possible?
Yeah. And it goes, what Trump being president's like Chaffetz being a representative of Salt Lake City. I mean, he didn't win the popular vote. We all know that, and it's insane that guy didn't win, and yet here he is. And then he keeps going on, and it's like no one stops him. No. I'm just waiting for somebody to physically grab him and just okay, we're done with this. Come on.
You're done.
That was fun. Now get out of here,
Time for your little pretend games to stop now.
This is Lucian Greaves with the Satanic Temple, and you're listening to Godless Revolution.
Indeed, I believe people when they say that they have experienced miracles. I believe that they think that they have. I think I'm obliged to credit them if it comes to that. As long as they keep it to, if you like, if I can put it like this, modestly as I dare, to themselves.
If you have questions, comments, concerns, compliments, corrections, criticisms, or concepts for content, contact the show via email at godlessrebelution@gmail.com, by text or voicemail at 330-81-REBEL, or Twitter the Twatter at TGR Podcast. Thank you!
You have been a delight to have in the studio with us this evening, Jason.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming over, man. And thank you for all of you. Like, I don't know that I would be sitting here doing this were it not for you and knowing you in my formative years, I guess.
Well, thanks. And that's humbling. And I guess anyone out there listening that is considering not speaking up, do. It's not that bad, generally.
Yeah.
And you never know. I mean, I really hope that doesn't come off like bragging. To me, it really is humbling to think like, wow, my dumbass said something at work, and then years later, this guy ended up being the president of the Atheists of Utah. I wouldn't.
And regional director of American Atheists.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Running a podcast.
I hope the message is just be honest, and you never know who's out there and who needs to hear it, and who might look at you as somebody that they can listen to. So. Yeah, I'll shut up. Sorry.
and talk to you, and just know that you're going to tell them what you honestly think, and
without being a dick about it. That's the key point there is to listen and just understand. You might not change everybody's mind, but your minds do change. So, I'm a former door-to-door Jesus salesman on an atheist podcast, drinking a beer right now. So. People change.
Before we go, I want to thank our Patreon subscribers. We got a new one this week. Yay! Angelica Pearson, who I got to hang out with at the Atheists of Utah camping trip last summer.
Oh, nice. Well, I was at the Atheists of Utah camping trip last summer.
Yeah, I'm sure you met her.
Okay.
I'll show you pictures and you'll go,
okay.
Oh, yeah, I remember her. Yeah.
Well, I was really drunk the one night, then the next day we're trying to get your truck fixed.
That fucking truck. It still runs. It's got a flat tire right now. But I also want to thank Our other longstanding supporters, Christy Kalbach, Andrew Vodopich, Wes Aaron, Utah Outcasts, Andy Faulkner, Taylor Grin, Grant Larimer, and Sabat Acuna. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it a whole lot. If you would go out and rate the show, that helps keep the show visible and gets other people, gets us in front of more eyes for other people to see it out there. Want to thank Yvette for being on the show again last week. That was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Jason, for coming on the show. This has been awesome. I've wanted to sit down and talk to you about all this for like the longest time. And so this has been...
It's been nice.
This has been a really good time, man. Coming up, I believe next week and or the following week, we're going to be hitting the politics pretty hard.
Oh.
Our unnamed source has been compiling a lot of information on Steve Bannon.
What I've read so far, I was like, holy shit, I didn't know half this stuff.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of crazy shit.
Yeah.
We've also got author Karen Garst, who will be on the show we're recording April 19th.
Yeah.
And I was contacted by Mithrin, who we had on the show previously. Yeah. And when he had been on the show before, talking about Nutty Mormon history, said that he was working on some books.
Yes.
And those are due to be released in April. So he will be joining us on the show to talk about those and some other fun stuffs.
He had some crazy stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy and true.
Yeah.
Crazy and true LDS church history stories. That's all I've got for tonight.
All right.
Y'all be excellent to each other. Thank you very much for listening. And we'll chat at you next week.
Bye. You surprised.
You guys have your poop in a group.
I want to do a stoner cooking show on YouTube, but I'm trying to figure out how to do it. But then I got high. This one girl's like, you really should start like your own cookbook or something. I was like, maybe I should do a YouTube channel and just be blazed and like making awesome food. And then when I'm in the hospital with my heart condition, it's all documented. There's what he ate, Doc.
You guys don't make any barley wines, do you?
Not very often. We did one for the 25th anniversary.
Okay.
Yeah, which also has my face on it, which I also had nothing to do with. Yeah. They actually, the art on the side of the building?
Yeah.
They had a competition to see which section of that art would be on our next beer label, and they had the public vote for it. And I'm like, please don't. I don't want it. Yeah. They picked my face, and I'm like, great.